Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 95 in our incredible new tutorial series where you are unleashing the power of your Raspberry Pi Pico W. What I will need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice. No sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of video lessons. And in this class, we will be using the Kepler kit for Raspberry Pi Pico W. Now, hopefully most of you guys already have your gear, but if you don't, take a look. Down in the description, there is a link over to Amazon, and you can hop on over there and pick your kit up. And believe me, your life and my life are going to be a whole lot simpler if we are working on identical hardware. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my solution to the homework assignment that I gave you in lesson number 94. But I must first ask, were you able to do it? If you successfully did the homework, leave a comment down below. I am legend. Double chest bump. And if you were not able to do it, leave a comment down below. I folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Now, hopefully most of you guys were able to do it. It was sort of a logical extension of the work that we had been doing with the state machine in the last few videos. And so hopefully this was just a nice way for you to show off your skill sets. But let's jump in and look at my solution. I will get out of your way and we will come over here and we will look at what the assignment was. The assignment was to create a binary up counter that if you press the red button, you were supposed to count up in binary as displayed on these 4 LED. And if you press the green button, you were supposed to reset, okay? Let me talk to you real quickly about how this circuit is set up. It's the circuit we've been using in the earlier lessons. The last 4 or 5 lessons have used this. We have 4 LEDs. The long leg of the rightmost LED is connected to GPIO pin 16, and then this one 17, 18, and the long leg of this one connected to GPIO pin 19. Then the short leg of these resistors, each one goes through a 330 ohm resistor down to the ground rail. The ground rail is established over here by connecting to physical pin 38. So we connect physical pin 38 to create the ground rail. Then we connect physical pin 36 to come down and establish this 3.3 volt power rail. Now the 3.3 volt power rail is used for the 2 buttons. We have 2 buttons. The left leg of each button is connected to the 3.3 volt rail, and then the right button on the right leg of the red button is connected to GPIO pin 14, and then the right leg of the green button is connected to GPIO pin 15. So we've got pin 14, we've got pin 15, and then we have pin 16, 17, 18, 19. Those are our GPIO pins. Now, what was the assignment? When you come in and press the red button, you count up in binary, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0. You count up when this button is pressed. Now, when you press the green button, you reset everything back to 0, okay? So this circuit we've used in the last few lessons, so hopefully you guys are comfortable with it. Hopefully you guys already have it hooked up so you can just jump right in and we are ready to start coding. So we're going to come over here to our code view and we are going to be using the pins. So we're going to need to say from machine, import pin. You should be familiar with that. We're going to be using the state machine, so we're going to import RP2, and then we are going to give the Raspberry Pi Pico a heads up that we've got incoming machine code. So we're going to use the @ decorator RP2 the library dot ASM for like assembly underscore PIO for the programmable input output unit. Now we are going to initialize these 4 output pins. And so how do we do that? We do that with an out underscore init, and then that is going to be equal to RP2, the library, RP2, the library.pio.out underscore low. So we are going to initialize the 4 pins to low when we start the state machine. Now we have to use that very awkward trailing comma, and then we need to close that output init. Now, how many GPIO pins do we have? We have 4 output pins, so we need to say times 4, like that. Now we got to give it the out shift dir, and I need to move this down to make sure you guys will be able to see it as I put that in. Okay, the output shifter we are going to set to RP2.PIO.shift underscore right. And this is kind of how like we always set things up for most things that we do on the state machine. I like to just sort of configure it this way, and it works for most things that we are going to do. Okay, so now you've seen that, you've got that typed in, so we move this back up out of your way. Now I need to define my function that'll hold the machine code. So I'm going to define, and then what this is going to be is this is going to be my bin count for my binary counter, and then we're just going to open and close, set it up. Now we're going to set a wrap target up at the top of the machine code function, and then we will go ahead and we will do our wrap. So we're kind of creating our loop here, our main loop, right? We're doing the wrap target and the wrap, that sets up the main loop. And then where does all the action happen? It happens between the wrap target and the wrap. But before we go in and get into the nitty gritty, I like to do kind of the bookkeeping type of stuff. So let's come down and go ahead and set up our pins, set up our input pins, and set up and instantiate the state machine. So I'm going to use pin 14. And what was pin 14? Pin 14 was going to be how we're going to read from the red button, the right button. And so how do we do that? We set that up as pin the method 14, the GPIO pin number. We tell it we want it to be an input pin, so .in, uppercase on the N, and then we are going to do pin.pull down. Why do we do that? We have to activate the pull down resistor. You see, I don't have an external pull down resistor, and so I have to activate the pull down resistor on pin 14. Now, similarly, we need to set up pin 15. So I'm going to copy that and paste it, and then we're going to come over here and set up pin 15, and pin 15 will be 15. It will be an input pin, and it will have an activated pull down resistor. So all that's good. Let's go ahead and instantiate the machine. So I'll call it state machine 0, and that is going to be equal to RP2, our library.state machine. Which state machine? We always seem to use state machine 0. That works well for us. We'll do that. You can do 0 through 7. Okay, we always seem to use state machine 0. Now, what is our function that we're going to be calling? Well, we're going to be calling bin count. Now, we need to identify the base input pin. So I say the in base pin is what? It is going to be 14. Now 14 is already, or in base, what is that nonsense? In base is equal to pin 14, which we've already initialized up here, and then everything will be done relative to pin 14. So I don't put pin 15 in here because everything is going to be measured relative to pin 14. And so you should be familiar with that. We've done that in the last few lessons. We want to run this thing slow so we can see the action as it happens. So we put it at a frequency of 2000 Hertz. That means each clock cycle cycle will be 1/2 of a millisecond, and that's about as slow as we can run. You can go a little bit lower, but I don't remember the exact, so I just always say 2000. And now we need to set up our out base. Our out underscore base is going to be equal to pin 16, right? And so let me make sure that you can see that. All right, and so remember, this is pin 16, 17, 18, 19, and so this base pin 16 will be our least significant bit in our 4 LEDs, and so hopefully that makes sense. And then somehow I don't have things closed out. I got to close out the state machine. All right, now I need to turn the state machine on, activate it. So sm0.active, and then we turn it to a 1 to turn it on. So all of that is good. Now, what do we do up here? What is the assignment? Every time you press the button, this counts up by 1, and if you press this button, then what is going to happen when you press this button? You're going to reset. Okay, so now I need to go ahead and initialize my counter. I'm going to keep my active number, the number that I'm at, in register Y. So I'm going to set that to Y, and then 0B, I'm going to start at 1, 1, 1, 1. Now, why do I start at 1, 1, 1, 1? Because there is no increment. There is no way to increment. The only thing that I can do is decrement. So I'm going to start at 1, 1, 1, 1, and each time the button is pushed, I am going to decrement by 1, but then I'm going to show the inverse, which will be the same thing then as incrementing. How do I increment? I decrement, and then I do the invert of that bit count. So therefore, I start at 1, 1, 1, 1. What is the inverse of that? 0, 0, 0, 0. So you see, we're kind of thinking in backwards land here. Why? Because we do not have a y increment or an x increment. We only have a x decrement. So we have to kind of work the problem backwards, if that makes sense. So we set that up to start the thing. Now we start our main loop here, and now what do I need to do? Well, initially I'm just going to be sitting and reading these 2 pins. Now this is going to be the 0, and this is so this is the least significant bit, this is the most significant bit, and so this is pin 14, this is pin 15. So I'm going to be looking for a 0, 0, or a 0, 1, or a 1, 0, or a 1, 1. Those are the possible combinations of the pins, and we've got to kind of go through those in our code if it makes sense. So we're going to start here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move into ISR, the input shift register, null. What does this do? This clears the input shift register, because last time through the loop, I had some number that I read into the input shift register, and this time I want to start with a fresh read. So everything is set to 0 in the ISR. Now, what do I want to do after that? I want to move. After I do that, now I want to read the 2 pins. And so how do I read the 2 pins with an N? I'm going to shift into what? The ISR. I'm going to shift, I will shift into the ISR, but into the ISR, I'm going to shift the pins, the input pins, and how many? 2. Okay, I talked really fast there. So with the N command, that references the N pins. So when I say pins, that references the N pins. And so what are the N pins? It is going to be pin 14, and there's 2 of them, so the next one will be 15. So it's going to read from GPIO pin 14 and the next one, which is 15. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to shift into the ISR the values that are on pin 14 and then pin 15. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So now the ISR will either have a 0, 0, or it will have a 0, 1, or it will have a 1, 0, or it will have a 1, 1. Now that that is in the ISR, I have to figure out what to do with it, okay? I have to figure out what to do with it. Well, the first thing I need to do after doing this read is I need to debounce the switch. So I'm going to put some delays in here. No op is one operation. Remember, at 2000 hertz, each clock cycle, each command is half a millisecond. And so this is half a millisecond delay, and I'll put another 31 in there for a total of 32 at a half milliseconds. This will pause the program for 16 milliseconds. That is not quite enough in my mind to debounce the switch, so I'm going to do it again. That's 1 plus another 31. That is 31 and 31 plus 1 and 1. That is 64 pauses of a half millisecond. That puts a delay of 32 milliseconds, which for me is enough to debounce my switch. So now I have in the ISR either a 00, a 01, a 10, or a 11. Now I'm going to want to compare that to other things, so I'm going to go ahead and move it to a more useful register. I'm going to move to X, that value, which is in ISR. So now what we have to see is that the X register has the button conditions. What is the X register going to have? It's going to now have 00, or it's going to have 01, or 10, or it's going to have 11. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so now what do I know? What do I know? I know that if the X value is 0001, the red button has been pushed, which is GPIO pin 14. All right. If X is 0010, that means this button is pressed, the green button, and the green button is GPIO pin 15. And if both of them are pressed, then I would have in X a 0011. Now that doesn't do anything, but we've got to kind of keep in our mind what somebody might be doing. They might press both of those buttons, and we got to make sure that it does the right thing. Okay, now let's think what we are going to do now. What we are going to do now is we are going to jump if there is jump, JMP, we're going to jump if there is nothing in X. And where are we going to jump? We are going to jump into read again. Now, what does this mean? Let's break it down. If there is nothing in X, that means this was not pressed, this was not pressed, nothing was pressed. So we just jump back up here. But now we have to have a place to jump to, so we are going to jump to label read again. Okay, so let's break that down. If we come down and we read from the buttons, we move it from ISR to X. If there is nothing in X, that means there's a 00, there is nothing set in X. That means that neither button was pressed. And so what do we want to do? We just want to come up here and read again. So this is just going to sit and it's going to loop until a button is pressed. Okay, so we will jump to read again. So there was nothing in X, so we jump up here. But what if there is something in X? Well, if there is something in X, then we want to move to the OSR what our Y value was. Now remember, our Y value is our active count. We start at 1111. The inverse of that will be 0000 because we've got to work kind of in backwards land because we can only decrement, we can't increment. So we're having to work in backwards land. So Y is the active count. It starts at 1111, which will display later, we'll show you as a 0000. And so now I really need to use that Y register, so that active count that is in Y, I've got to move it out of the way. And so I'm going to move it to the output shift register just because I can. I've only got 4 registers, so I got to move things out of the way so that I can play around with that Y register a little bit. Okay, so I move Y to OSR. It's out of the way, and Y has our present count. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set Y to 0B0001. Well, now what would that mean? Remember, these two zeros out here we're not using, but then this would be 0 and this would be a 1. So what I want to do is I want to check for a red button push. So I'm going to set Y to 0001, and then I can check for a red button push. Now what do? I'm going to jump. I am going to jump if X is not Y. Okay, and then what I will do is I will check for a green. Okay, so everything is like backwards logic, so you've got to really think careful here. If X is not Y, what is X? It's the present read. If it is not 0001, then what do I want to do? I want to jump down to checking if the green was pressed, because if X is not Y, that means the red button was not pressed. Okay, if the red button was not pressed, I'm going to check to see if the green button was pressed. But if X is Y, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll put here label check green. Okay, so if red is not pushed, then I will jump down to this section of code. But this section of code means, what does this section of code means? This code means that red was pressed. Okay, why does it mean red was pressed? Because it didn't jump to check green. So it means, what does it mean? It means that X was Y. What does it mean? X was Y. What does that mean? That I had pressed the red button, which would be a 0 and a 1. Okay, I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but I want you to really understand what I'm doing, because in Python land, you talk about what is. It's like in the state machine, I'm having to do everything kind of backwards, sort of negative things. So I just feel like that I really need to kind of explain it well, and hopefully I'm not getting on your guys' nerves by doing that. So here I would come down to check green, okay? But if I don't jump to check green, that means the red button was pressed. Now, if the red button was pressed, I want to go back and I want to move. I want to get my number back. What number do I want? I want to get Y. I want to, let's see here. Yeah. Okay. So let me come back here. So if X is not Y, at this point, it means the red button was pressed. So in that case, what do I want to do? I want to move to Y, the OSR, right? Y is my active count. I had moved it to OSR so I could use Y for something else. Now I got to go get OSR, which now is the active count. I've got to move it back to Y. So once again, Y is my present active count. Okay, Y is my present active count. Now what I need to do is, since I pressed red, I want to increment my count. Well, how do I do that? I don't have a Y increment. So what do I have to do? I have to jump a Y decrement. So Y decrement is going to decrement Y, and I jump to NXT. All right. And then get rid of that extra comma, man. Okay. Now what does NXT do? I'm just going to label here NXT. So if I press X, then X is not going to be Y. So if I press the red button, X is not going to be Y. And so I move my active count in OSR back to Y. And then what do? I decrement Y. I decrement it. Why? Because I can't increment it. I got to work in backward space. So I decrement it, which is the only thing that I can do. And now, since I am working in backwards land, I move to the pins the invert of Y. I move to the pins the invert of Y. So what is Y? Well, Y was 1, 1, 1, 1. And then what do I do here? I decrement Y, which means it's going to go to 1, 1, 1, 0. And then what do I move? I move to the pins the invert of Y. What is the invert of 1, 1, 1, 0? It's 0, 0, 0, 1. So you see I'm doing a decrement counter, but then I'm inverting it, which makes it an increment counter. Okay, so what do I do at this point? Now, what I should have is a 0, 0, 0, 1. Because I went from 1, 1, 1, 1, I decremented it to 1, 1, 1, 0. Now I invert it, I have a 0, 0, 0, 1, which would be an up count. Have I just totally made you want to move to some cooking channel from there? Okay. I hope I'm not talking too much, but I just really want you guys to understand. And so that is why I'm explaining it in such great detail. So now what I've done is I've decremented it, and then I have applied it to the pin, so the pin should light up. And now what am I ready to do? I'm ready to read again, because what do I know? I know that I had a red button push. I decrement my counter. I apply it to the LED, and now I'm going to jump all the way back up here to read again. But we got to this point. Because some button was pressed, okay? And if it was red, if the button press was red, I would do this. But if it was not red, then what we're going to do is we're going to jump down to check green. We're going to jump over this code because it wasn't the red button. So we're going to jump down to this code, which is going to be label check green. Okay, it is going to be label check green. So I'm here now, and what this means is the red button was not pressed. So now I want to see, was the green button pressed? Okay, so I'm going to check here. Now I'm going to check green. I got here. I jumped here if the red button wasn't pressed. Now I want to see, was the green button pressed? So what do? I'm going to set now Y to 0, B, 0, 0, 1, 0. So that would be a 1. Green is pressed and the red isn't. So I'm going to check for that condition. Okay, I'm going to check for that condition. Now, I am going to jump if X is not Y to read again. So let's break that down. So now if X, which was the value that I read, if the value that I read is not 0, 0, 1, 0, if it's not 0, 0, 1, 0, what do I want to do? I want to go back and read again. What that probably means is it was a 1, 1, okay? Because if it was a 0, 1, it would have done the code at the top. And then if it's a 1, 0, then it would be here. But if X is not a 1, 0, then what I want to do is I just want to read again. And hopefully that makes sense. So what I'll do is I'll jump up to read again. So remember, the number that we read from the pins is in X. So this is the number that we read from the pins. And if it's not 1, 0, I just want to read again. I don't want to do anything. Okay, but if I get to this next line of code, what does it mean? Okay, if I get to the next line of code, that means that it was pressed. The green was pressed. It was a 1, 0. And in that case, what do I want to do? I want to reset. So now I'm going to reset my Y to 0B 1, 1, 1, 1. I'm going to reset it, and that will display later as a 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay. So now I want to move the reset value 2 pins, but remember we always have to do it backwards with this, with Y, like that. Okay. Now what do? I wrap like that. Okay. Now, could that really work? Let's run it. Let's see how many. Line 34. What did we do in line 34? State machine. Let me put it down here where you state machine uppercase. Man, I'm getting a ring coming in. We've got a fisherman out there. I bet he's going to be heading to the shore pretty soon. Okay. See, he's pulling in his net. I would love to sit and watch the fisherman, but let's come back over here. Okay, so now why do I have 2 wraps there? Okay, I'd started out with a wrap, so I have 2 wraps. So let's go. Okay, now, all eyes on the LED. Okay, look at this. Now, it doesn't quite work, but it does sort of work. What happens? It's counting up, but it's going really, really, really fast. Now, why is it going really, really fast? Let's see if the reset works. The reset works, but let's see if I do it really fast, why does it work? Well, it works because when I press the button, then what number do I read in? When I press the red button, I read into ISR 0, 1. Green is not pushed, red is pushed. I read in a 0, 1. Okay? And then what happens? I set Y to 0, 0, 0, 1, and then I see if X is not 0, 0, 1, I jump down, but X is 0, 0, 0, 1. And so what does it do? It decrements the counter, which I apply the inverse, which counts up. Okay, and then it goes to read again. So when I do this, it reads, counts, displays so fast that if I don't do it quickly, it doesn't work. So what do I want to do? I want to go into the code on a down, but then I don't want to display until I get an up. So I want a kind of two-step process so it doesn't sit there and read that quickly. And so how do I do that? Okay, how do I do that? Well, I'll come down to this jump. Let's see, where is the best place to do that? The best place to do that is on the next. Okay. Well, we'll do it in 2 places. Probably we will do it in 2 places. There's a lot of places that we could put it, but let's say before we move the pins to Y, okay, before we do this, we are going to hang here. Okay, we are going to hang here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say wait on pin 0, because how did we get here? We got here if red was pressed. And so I'm going to wait for a release, which is a logic state 0 on the input pin, okay, and which pin? Pin 0. Which pin 0 would be, this one is an input, this one would be a pin 1 because we referenced from 14, so pin 14 would be relative pin 0. Okay, so I press it and I get here, but I don't want to move forward until I release it, so I put this in. Okay, now I probably need to do that again where I say jump, read again. Well, down here on the reset, I probably want to do the same thing. So I'm going to wait again on pin 0 for a 0. Is that pin 0 or would that be a pin 1? Here I want to wait for a pin 1 so it doesn't just sit, because this one would be pin 1. So I'm going to wait for the release on this, and I'm going to wait for the release on this. So let's see if this works. Okay, so there, nothing happens. Boom. Watch the long button push. Boom. Now watch this. This one, if I press reset down, it's not going to reset. Well, it did. Okay, let's see. Now, why did that do that? I'm waiting for a 0 on pin 1. Okay, and then I think that is not in the right place. Yeah, that is not in the right place. I need to do it down here where I check green. Okay, and here what I am going to do is I'm going to say wait for a 0. Yeah, wait for a 0 on pin 1. Okay, like that. So let's see if this works. Okay, so I count up. A long push does not make it count too much. And then boom. Okay, so I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then reset. Okay, guys, we have done this. Now, I hope this was not too tedious for you, but what is the problem? We have 8 or 9 commands, and what the problem is, we don't have a Y increment. So to do a count up counter, I have to start at 1, 1, 1, 1, and I have to count down. But then when I apply it to the LEDs, I invert it. So a 1, 1, 1, 1 inverts to a 0, 0, 0, 0. Then if I decrement 1, 1, 1, 1, if I decrement 1, 1, 1, 1, I go to 1, 1, 1, 0, and then when I invert it, sending it to the pins, I end up with a 0, 0, 0, 1. But then like all the logic in this thing becomes backwards. And so if this doesn't make sense, you can go back and you can watch it again. Okay, you can go back and watch it again. But I think it will make sense if you watch it a second time and just understand that I'm not trying to be difficult in the way that I program it, but all the logic is sort of reversed. Why is the logic reversed? The logic is reversed because I do not have a Y increment or an X increment, and so I've got to do it with the command I have, which is decrement, and then I have to make everything else around that backwards. I hope you guys are having as much fun taking this class as I am making it. This guy in the boat, he is really out there in a pretty big rainstorm. I don't know if he's picking up his nets. Maybe he's trying to get his nets in before he comes in, but it is really raining. So we are looking forward to him heading to shore very quickly because the rain does become quite intense around here. We are in the rainy season. Okay, let's talk about the homework. Okay, let's talk about the homework. This is the homework, and the homework assignment is something that I've given you in the live stream as a grand challenge because I gave you the homework assignment before I'd really given you a lot of the commands that you know now. And we did have 2 winners on the grand challenge. And let me tell you what the homework assignment is. I gave it to you earlier on the live stream. And what the homework assignment is to create a binary up-down counter. Okay, so watch this. I come in. Ooh, oh, that was down. Ignore that. Okay, let's start over. The green is the up, so I go 1, 2, 3, and I'm at 3. I go 2, 1, 0. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I go 4, 3. We're back to 4. So I have an up-down counter. Okay, I have an up-down counter using only the state machine. Okay, so you can't do this in Python. You've got to do it in the state machine. And so what I've got to show you here is, yes, you have to give the @ command, and then you define your function, and then yes, you have to instantiate your state machine and you have to turn it on, but all of the code has to go here where you can count up or you can count down. You can count up or you can count down. You can count up or you can count down. Now, I gave this as a grand challenge several weeks ago, and we had 2 winners, and I have to kind of declare it a tie. And maybe since then, more of you guys got a solution, but the people that solved it first, Quaternions, showed up the very first, and so he was declared the winner. But then it became clear that Charlotte, at almost identical times, maybe a little bit before Quaternion, had gotten the solution. But when she tried to paste the comment, YouTube deleted her comments. And so I think she actually got it done a couple of hours before Quaternion, but both of them independently got it in the first couple of days after the Grand Challenge. And so we tip our hats to Charlotte and we tip our hats to Quaternion. And now, hopefully, since that time, hopefully several of others of you are going to be able to do this, okay? But don't go in and look at their solutions. You've got to come up with your solution on your own, okay? So that was the grand challenge that I gave, and now the rest of you, now that you have more lessons, hopefully it will be easier. Okay, I hope this guy is not going to sink out there. Very worried. We actually have more drownings than you would like out there. A lot of the currents can be very strong and they can come on quickly, and so we'll pray for him to get back to shore safely here. But guys, I hope you're enjoying taking this class as much as I am making it. If you enjoyed the class, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. Both of those will help. And as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are supporting me at Patreon. You guys that are standing with me on Patreon, you're the ones that keep this great content coming. I want to give you a great big thank you for that. Also, when you subscribe to the channel, make sure that you ring that bell so you'll get notifications when future lessons drop. And most importantly, share this video with other people, because the world needs more people doing engineering and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.